You may have heard of the expression, don't cut your nose off to spite your face. And it's true in business as it's true in life. And well, recently when it comes to Disney, I feel like they may have done just that in light of a pandemic with regards to their construction. But I'll explain why I think this is the case in this DSNY deep dive up next. On March 12, 2020, Disney announced that they were suspending all operations and temporarily shutting Disney parks around the world in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was unquestionably the right thing to do. But then a few days later, on March 17th, it was reported by the Orlando Business Journal that the Central Florida chapter of Associated Builders and Contractors confirmed that all construction had been indefinitely postponed at Walt Disney World. And following not long after that, it was also clarified that projects were paused at Disneyland Resort and Disneyland Paris as well. Meanwhile, just a few miles down the road from Walt Disney World, Universal Studios Orlando were going full steam ahead on construction of their latest and greatest attraction, Jurassic World Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure. And as we saw in the making of the Velocicoaster documentary available on Peacock, Universal's creative team managed to maintain progress with virtual reviews and meetings and ensure that construction workers were safely protected, even though the construction was slower because of the new pandemic measures. And yet despite that, with the parks temporarily closed, it meant that construction could be carried out on a 24-hour basis without disrupting park operations, which in the end, when it came to the attendance boost in summer of 2021, Universal had a brand new original roller coaster ready to open in June, whereas Disney had nothing new to compete with, thus proving as always that fortune favours the bold. But this was intentional on Disney's part, as you see Remy's Ratatouille adventure was completed construction-wise and could have opened earlier in summer if they wanted it to. And Disney decided to metaphorically mothball the attraction and purposely delay its opening to coincide with the kickoff of Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary celebration. Which wouldn't be the worst idea from a business and marketing perspective if it wasn't for the fact that this was a clone of the same ride that opened all the way back in 2014 at Disneyland Paris, meaning that a lot of the hype that was there was depressed by the long construction time and delays for what had been proven to be a very popular family-friendly attraction. And look, I think it's all too easy sometimes to forget just how uncertain things were in 2020 and into 2021. With each new variant came huge waves of COVID case numbers that seemingly undermined any long-term planning for the future. And with the benefit of hindsight, it looks oh so simple to say where things could have been done better. But that's the thing, as in April of 2020 I did a video all about the construction pause, in which I cited international theme park planning expert Frank Stanek, who astutely warned that economic downturns is the time to reinvest in construction infrastructure, and that those who move forward with their projects will capture more market share when the cycle of uncertainty ends and tourism and visitor growth returns. And it's that right there that is Disney's major parks problem. But that's not where we should stop, as we need to go even deeper, as you see there's many more factors that we must consider when talking about this topic. As despite Universal Parks CEO Tom Williams stating in April 2020 that construction projects around the globe were to all remain active and on track under protocols established by government officials, it is extremely important to also understand that Disney had a lot more invested in active construction projects worldwide compared to that of Universal when the pandemic hit. But on top of all of that, Disney's business was also more exposed to the negative effects of the pandemic, as the shuttering of more parks around the world meant more responsibility for temporary financial support for cast members, and also Disney's cruise line business was effectively dead in the water for nearly a year and a half, whereas Universal's parent company, Comcast, suffered the same film production issues that Disney did and a loss of parks revenue on a smaller scale. But the pandemic had pretty much no effect on Comcast's core telecommunications business of providing cable and broadband to households during the pandemic. Therefore, it's understandable to see why Disney reacted so strongly, as nearly every aspect of their business was on life support, with the only exceptions being the media networks and Disney+. However, in response, Disney raised an astonishing $17 billion through debt sell-offs in March and May of 2020 to keep them afloat. And so with all of that cash, it poses the interesting question of why couldn't Disney at least have kept one single project completely active throughout the pandemic shutdown like Universal did. To which I think there really isn't a very good reason at all, as after all, Disney was seen to be reducing and then reallocating capital expenditure from the parks division over to Disney Plus production, and have since stated that they are doubling down on investment in Disney Plus, with plans to spend $33 billion on content in 2022. And I get it, Disney Plus is in a hyper-competitive make-or-break stage within the streaming wars, and so it needs to be the core focus of the company. But focusing on streaming at the expense of the Disney Parks division may prove to be fatally flawed. As you see, the Disney Parks are also in a hyper-competitive battle, and easing up right now will create an irreversible concession of market share to Universal Studios, which in turn Disney will then panic and rush into an expensive game of catch-up. And the reason why I say this is because we've seen it happen once before. As long before Universal Studios had the theme park rights to Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling went to Disney first, and they presented a very limited vision of what they wanted to do with the franchise. So J.K. Rowling went to Universal, who leapt at the opportunity and dreamt up a new immersive and imaginative approach to intellectual property integration and world building within their parks. And this was the first domino to fall in the modern theme park wars. As when the Wizarding World of Harry Potter opened in 2010, it sent a shockwave throughout Disney leadership, giving them the realization that Universal had just raised their game in terms of immersive storytelling. And in response, Bob Iger sought out the theme park rights to James Cameron's Avatar and also purchased Lucasfilm in 2012. And before Disney could even officially announce the two Star Wars themed lands in 2015, a year earlier, Universal had opened their second Harry Potter land with Diagon Alley in 2014. And so all of this happening before critically illustrates the importance of maintaining a competitive edge within the theme park industry. But then we come to another part of this dilemma, and I actually think it's of Disney's own making. As in recent years, theme park fans have begun to notice the construction build times at Universal tend to be much shorter than that of Disney. And though this is true, it's also more complicated than it seems. As first of all, as I mentioned earlier, Disney has more projects on the go simultaneously than Universal Studios Orlando. Although that is about to change with Epic Universe, but at least for now, the argument that Universal managed to announce, construct and open Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure and the Velocicoaster, while Cosmic Rewind and Tron are still under construction, is a poor comparison. As in that same time period, Disney also opened Galaxy's Edge with Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, the Disney Skyliner, Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. But there is one element that Universal does that Disney definitely needs to learn from, and that is that Universal tends to begin site preparation and construction long before they ever officially announce a project. So much so that it became a running joke that the Velocicoaster was just a churro stand. And so it's partly this announcement strategy that makes it seem as if they have a much shorter construction build time than there actually is. And importantly, it also maintains fans' interest and anticipation for the opening of the attraction or land. And here's the thing, as I know firsthand from running this YouTube channel for nearly 5 years, that interest does wane over time with the ebb and flow of different Disney construction projects, which is only compounded by the fact that nearly everything new that's left to open at Walt Disney World in the next year was announced all the way back at D23 Expo in 2017. So it's not surprising to see why people complain about the construction taking forever, as these projects in many respects have what I call an attraction interest shelf life, meaning that the hype and interest can only be sustained for so long with new marketing releases before it begins to cast a shadow over the attraction's eventual opening. Although I think that the last factor that's going to be playing into Disney's construction dilemma is Imagineering's move to Lake Nona, Florida, as this upheaval within Imagineering is coming at a very critical time for the theme park industry, as there's going to be some institutional knowledge lost as Imagineers don't want to make the move, and those that do will need to hit the ground running. And I think overall, the move will end up being very positive for Walt Disney World in the long run. But it does leave Imagineering's teams in disarray as they adjust to the new working relationships, which will in the short term will leave them in a weaker position when needing to respond to Epic Universe. And so, having discussed all of these various factors at play here, it brings us to the question of what's next for the Disney parks. And despite having pointed out their vulnerability, it's not like Universal is going to overtake Disney, as the two resorts are in very different stages of their product maturity, as Walt Disney World will always be seen as a vacation destination. But the more room that Disney gives Universal for extra market share, the more that families and their perception will change from their vacations just being all about Disney to being about Disney and Universal and not remaining just within the Disney bubble. And so a lot is going to be riding on this upcoming D23 Expo in September 2022. As I'm not saying that Disney will or needs to announce a fifth park, but they definitely need to have a few big projects in the pipeline if they want to be seen as remaining competitive with Epic Universe, as its expected opening is in 2025. Or Disney will end up giving ground over to Universal to make an irreversible dent in their market share that they'll end up regretting for years to come. But now, as always, it's over to you, the Wonderlists, as I would love to know what are your thoughts and opinions on this topic about construction delays, and what are your general feelings about Disney versus Universal in the years to come. And if you've enjoyed this different kind of in-depth deep dive today, then be sure to share this video with a friend online, as it helps to get more people talking about this topic and opens up more of a discussion. And if you want more videos from DSNY Newscast, check these ones out here. And I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.